Here's how to do mattress stitch for rib, step by step. This invisible seam looks like the rest of your rib for a super neat finish. 1x1 ribbing has clear knit stitch columns. If you stretch your ribbing out, you see purl stitch columns in between each knit stitch. To seam rib with mattress stitch, you want a knit stitch on both sides of the seam, so you seam into purl stitches on each side and this disappears in the middle. Just like with mattress stitch for stockinette, the key is knowing exactly where to put your needle. With stockinette, we worked one stitch in from each side. And if you have an odd number of rib stitches, you do the same here. But my pattern uses an even number of rib stitches, which is quite common. So that means the first stitch is a knit stitch on one side, but a purl stitch on the other. Now we want to seam into a purl stitch on both sides. So we'll still work one stitch in on the side that starts with a knit stitch. But this time we'll work into the very first stitch on the other side, because it's a purl column. So if you look at any purl stitch column, it's made up of U shapes, or smiles if you prefer. And then beside these there are N shapes, or frowns. So to get an invisible seam, we'll seam through the U shapes on one side and the N shapes on the other. It doesn't matter which side is which. Another change from stockinette mattress stitch is that we're going to seam every row here. Now the side that starts with a purl stitch only looks like it has half the number of rows at first glance. So my top tip when you're learning is to carefully count the rows on both sides first. If you stretch out the first purl stitch column and look closely, you realise there are more rows hiding there. Putting your needle through all the N shapes or U shapes makes them easy to count. You may find it easier to get at the N shapes on one side than the other. I've decided to go through the N shapes on the left side, so I'll need to go through U shapes on the right. Let's start seaming. So start on the opposite side to the last stitch as usual. I'm starting on the right, so I need to go through a U shape first. It's easy to see the first row of rib because you can see the little U-shaped bumps above the stockinette all along it. So I put my needle through the first U shape on the right side and pull through loosely as usual. Now on the left side, just above where I came up from the previous stitch, I'm looking for the N shape in the edge purl stitch. There it is. So I put my needle through the N and pull through loosely. Now back to the right side, and I go through the next U shape just above where I did the last stitch and pull through. Now back to the left side. It's harder to make out each individual row in the edge purl stitch, so stretch it out a bit to make sure you're not skipping a row. Then put your needle through the next N shape and pull through loosely. Then just repeat the same steps for every rib row. Just make sure you stick to one shape on each side. So I'm seaming through U-shape stitches on the right and N shapes on the left. Once you reach the end, or run short of yarn like me, it's time for the magic. Give your seam a big pull and watch it disappear. When you pull apart the seam, you see N shapes beside U shapes, just like any other purl stitch in your rib. And because you'll be using matching yarn instead of a contrast colour, it really will look invisible. Once you've seamed all your rib, the final step is to weave in your end. If you used a long tail cast on, each stitch overlaps to give a nice curved edge. So I like to add an extra loop to this edge for a neat finish. I thread my yarn down through the curve on the right and then back up through the curve on the left before weaving it into the inside of the hat. This sticks out in the contrast colour, but in the matching yarn colour it blends in nicely. All done! Hooray! I've linked below to the free beginner beanie hat pattern used in this demo. Got any questions? Just comment below. Thanks for watching.